new global debate on the question of terrorist kidnapping. This is the Blackboard Collaborate, and if you look on the upper left-hand side of your screen, you will see the talk and video buttons. You click these to turn your mic on, and when you're done speaking, please unclick the talk button to ensure that we avoid feedback. If you look just below the talk button, you will see the 4 icons, the smiley face, the away, and the placard raising sign, as well as the voting sign, which will be used later. And that's all you need to know about Blackboard. So without further ado, my name is Rashmi Rajagopalan, and I am your chair for this debate cycle. Stephen Pan will be our amendments moderator. Murray Tushi will be our tally moderator. Shukri Shahizam will be our chat moderator. Salam Keedan will be our other chat moderator. We will now commence with roll call. When the chair calls your country, please click on talk and indicate that you are present. When you are finished speaking, be sure to turn off your microphone. Delegate of Afghanistan.
Honorable Chair, fellow delegates, the Delegate of Afghanistan is present.
Delegate of Argentina.
Present and voting.
China. Delegate of China. Delegate of Costa Rica.
Present and voting.
Delegate of Finland. Delegate of France.
Present and voting.
Delegate of Kuwait.
Present and voting.
Delegate of Luxembourg. Delegate of Pakistan.
Present and voting.
Delegate of Cuba.
Present and voting.
Delegate of Singapore.
Voting.
Delegate of the United States of America.
Present and voting.
Thank you, delegates. The resolution will be now pulled upon the screen, and we will start the debate. If all delegates are able to see the resolution on the right-hand side of the screen, could you please give a smiley face? The House will now come to order. The chair sets a reading time of 3 minutes for this resolution. Please use this time wisely to look over the resolution and start writing amendments. The House will now come to order. The next resolution to be debated is on the question of terrorist hostage-taking. Would the main submitter of Pakistan please make his opening speech?
Honorable chairs and esteemed delegates, Pakistan maintains a multilateral approach to the issue of terrorist hostage-taking. As a result, this resolution stresses international cooperation through ways such as utilizing UNOs and ratifying UN resolutions and multilateral agreements on the issue. This resolution has a balance of preventative measures, such as increasing surveillance, and measures to respond to unpreventable hostage situations, including protecting infrastructure and employing a zero concessions policy. Furthermore, this resolution is flexible enough that each nation can implement the measures listed in the clauses in a ways that would suit the nations individually. Pakistan would like to draw special attention to clauses 15 and 16. Clause 15 seeks to adopt a zero concessions policy towards terrorist hostage negotiations, a policy already adopted by many member states. Full support or greater support of this policy, however, would be hugely beneficial to mitigating the international issue of terrorist hostage taking. This policy aims to alleviate the incentive for terrorists to pursue hostage taking in the hopes of receiving concessions or ransoms from the government. Further, Clause 16 calls for the monitoring of the Internet, especially social networking sites, to catch terrorist hostage-taking activity. Delegates, in the changing world we live in today as a result of the digital revolution, we must adapt conventional measures to dealing with issues. We must adapt to use the Internet, a platform for many terrorist activities. Though some of the clauses deal with the issue of terrorism as a whole, the crux of this resolution is the issue of measures to prevent terrorist hostage taking. Pakistan hopes that we can have a fruitful debate on this topic and create innovative solutions to the issue.
Thank you, Delegate. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
Any and all.
The delegate has opened himself to any and all points of information. Are there any in the House at this time? Delegate of Argentina, you have been recognized.
Doesn't the delegate think that ransoms should be cancelled and terrorists should be punished?
Yes, the delegate agrees.
Are there any further points of information in the House at this time? Seeing as there are none, would the delegate please yield the floor back to the chair or to another delegate?
The delegate yields the floor back to the chair.
Thank you. The floor is now open. Are there any delegates that wish to speak on this resolution as a whole? The chair repeats, the floor is now open. Are there any delegates wishing to speak on this resolution as a whole? This means that delegates may speak for or against and raise any amendments that they have. Delegate of Afghanistan, you have been recognized.
Overall, this resolution deals with terrorism as a whole. I feel like it needs to underline specific acts of if a hostage were taken, and to what degree should we treat them, and if we have no concessions, how are we going to deal with them directly? So, as Afghanistan dealing with the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, we find this imperative to our cause, our mission with the United States to stop in all of these acts. But through this resolution, it doesn't really personify what we think could actually be an innovative plan to stop this.
Thank you, Delegate. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
Yes.
The delegate has opened himself to points of information. Are there any such points in the House? Seeing as there are none, would the delegate please yield the floor back to the chair?
Give my time back to the chair.
Thank you. The floor is once again open. Are there any delegates wishing to speak on this resolution as a whole? Delegate of Kuwait, you have been recognized.
The delegate has submitted an amendment. Will it be recognized?
That is in order. The amendment reads to add Clause 20, urges nations to have rapid response teams, RRT, set up to combat any acts of terrorist hostage-taking at any time within its borders. The Chair sets a closed debate time of 3 minutes for and 3 minutes against this amendment. Delegate, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This resolution, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates, this resolution, while solid, mainly talks about terrorism as a whole, and not the topic we've come here to deal with, terrorist hostage-taking. This amendment provides a real-world solution, which is vital to stopping this hideous and cowardly act of taking hostages. While shooting bullets is not the first option of any country, when acts as bad as this occur, we must put down force with force. This delegate would like to strongly urge the House to vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
2.
The delegate has opened himself to 2 points of information. Are there any in the House at this time? Delegates of Costa Rica and the United States of America, you have been recognized.
Good evening, Honorable Chair and delegates. This delegate believes that it's important to combat terrorism as a whole, but we need to first attack little things like terrorist hostage-taking. Thank you.
Could the
Delegate,
Chair
please phrase your point of information in the form of a question, which can be directed to the delegate of Kuwait. Delegate of Costa Rica?
Yes,
Please rephrase your point of information.
So, to the delegate of Kuwait. So, how are you going? How do you think that nations are going to have a rapid response team when most of the countries that are suffering terrorism are countries that are poor? So.
Thank you for your question, delegate. As the delegate of Kuwait has submitted an amendment which says to set up rapid response teams, and this can be done in any country, whether MEDC or LADC, doesn't matter, and they can all be set up with the help of international NGOs. And this amendment will not only help keep the acts of terrorism low, but also decrease the chances of anyone ever trying to take hostages when they know such team is in place. Thank you.
Delegate of the United States of America.
Delegate of Kuwait believe that an international rapid response team would be more effective than 192 separate rapid response teams.
Well, one international rapid response team, that would be, this delegate feels that it would be complete madness, because having one team to face 190 acts of terrorism in across more than 190 countries, it would be a Herculean task. I mean, this delegate does not see that as possible, unless, of course, the team is very large and almost as big as an army.
Thank you, Delegate. Would the delegate please yield the floor back to the chair?
Yes, this delegate yields the floor back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now in time for this amendment. Are there any delegates wishing to speak for this amendment? Seeing as there are none, we will now move into time against this amendment. Are there any delegates wishing to speak against this amendment? Delegate of Afghanistan, you have been recognized.
The idea of having a rapid response teams to combat terrorism seems a little ambiguous to me with the idea of borders. The ideas of nations within the borders could mean literally within the borders, or it could mean within the military presence. So as Afghanistan, we see that as a sort of vague idea. We need more stuff to specify this issue and clarify this.
Thank you, Delegate. The Chair would just like to remind the House to please refrain from using personal pronouns such as I, you, and me. Is the Delegate open to any points of information?
Yes, the Delegate of Afghanistan would.
The Delegate has opened himself to points of information. Are there any in the House at this time? Delegate of Kuwait, you have been recognized.
Does the delegate of Afghanistan not feel that having a rapid response team within the nation's own borders would be a much more efficient and faster way of facing and stopping any kind of terrorist hostage-taking attacks?
Well, right as of now, my national response team is the United States. So to have a nation deal with our problems, because we don't really have a military that could actually deal with this issue, I believe might be a better idea to leave it to one person.
Request, Chair, for follow-up.
Granted.
Seeing as the delegate feels that the USA is its protector, couldn't the delegate convince the United States military to train some of Afghanistan's own police force to become the rapid response team and then implement it?
The United States, as of now, are training our police force, but it does not reach the capabilities of the United States military abilities to prevent these hostage crises. So as going further into the question, yes, we're trying to make a team that would be more respectful in the sense of trying to take down hostages, but we still need these troops to stay and bring down these terrorist people.
Thank you, Delegate. Would the Delegate please yield the floor back to the Chair?
The Delegate of Afghanistan would like to yield this time back to the floor.
Thank you. The Chair would once again like to remind the House to please refrain from using personal pronouns such as I, you, and me. We are still in time against this amendment. Are there any delegates wishing to speak against this amendment? Delegate of the United States of America, you have been recognized.
Although this delegate believes that in practice this clause would be a good idea, for each country to have its own rapid response team is not possible and not suitable, as it could cause further conflicts if a special operations team went into another country and fought terrorists.
Thank you, Delegate. Is the Delegate open to any points of information?
Delegate is open to 2 points of information.
The Delegate has opened himself to 2 points of information. Are there any in the House at this time? Delegates of Kuwait and Pakistan, you have been recognized.
Thank you, Delegate of USA. if the United States feels that having a rapid response team, having a country having a rapid response team would be contradictory to some special forces entering a sovereign nation and to attack terrorists within another country's borders, wouldn't it be better if a country had a rapid response team which could aid some other special response team to combat terrorism?
Yeah, please ask the Delegate of Kuwait to rephrase his question.
That is in order. Delegate of Kuwait, would the delegate please rephrase their point of information?
Does the delegate of USA not feel that having a country having its own rapid response team would better aid an international rapid response team which would enter the country to combat terrorism?
This delegate believes that one internationally set up rapid response team would be suitable as opposed to many individual rapid response teams. For example, a rapid response team that was set up under Interpol.
Doesn't the delegate of the USA agree that having a separate rapid response team for each nation would be more beneficial than just one international rapid response team, as having an international rapid response team with military power could be viewed by some nations as violations of national sovereignty?
Does not believe that, because this task force would be set up and include members of armed forces from all around the world. So there would not be any arguments. Well, there would most likely not be any arguments as to an invasion of national sovereignty.
Thank you, Delegate. Would the delegate please yield the floor back to the chair?
Delegate yields the floor back to the chair.
Thank you. Time on this amendment as a whole has now elapsed. We will now move into voting procedures on this amendment. Delegates may vote for or against. For those delegates that are new to O-MUN, to vote, you must click the check sign under the talk button, which you will see next to the raising your placard. With a vote of 6 for and 5 against, this amendment passes. We will now move back into open debate on this resolution as a whole. Are there any delegates wishing to speak on this resolution? Delegate of Cuba, you have been recognized.
I have submitted an amendment. Will that be recognized?
That is in order. The amendment reads to strike Clause 14. The chair sets a closed debate time of 4 minutes for and 4 minutes against this amendment. Delegate, you now have the floor.
Honorable Chair, fellow delegates, we are here to discuss issues related to terrorist hostage taking. And Clause 14, while it may have good intentions, only refers to stopping terrorist attacks. It has nothing to do with terrorist hostage taking. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
No.
Is the delegate open to any points of information?
Any and all?
The delegate has opened himself to any and all points of information. Are there any in the House at this time? Delegates of Kuwait and Argentina, you have been recognized.
Does the delegate of the Republic of Cuba not feel that it would be wiser to simply change and modify Clause 14 instead of completely striking out to suit our current topic, which is terrorist hostage taking? It's just a matter. This delegate feels that it's just a matter of wording.
No, this delegate does not feel it's a matter of wording. It's more or less a 4-point plan for how countries would prevent terrorist attacks. It doesn't really have anything to do with hostage taking. I mean, you could take it out and it wouldn't really make a difference one way or another.
Does the delegate believe that this Clause 14 is too general and does not help the resolution in any way?
Yes, the delegate does believe that.
Thank you, delegate. Would the delegate please yield the floor back to the chair?
The delegate yields the floor back to the chair.
Thank you. We are now in time for this amendment. Are there any delegates wishing to speak for this amendment? Delegate of France, you have been recognized.
The delegate of Cuba addresses a key concern in this resolution, that it lacks focus, and thus it would be necessary to take away Clause 14 in order to make this resolution more focused and more effective.
Thank you, delegate. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
1 point of information.
The delegate has opened himself to 1 point of information. Are there any in the House at this time? Seeing as there are none, would the delegate please yield the floor back to the chair?
This delegate yields the floor back to the chair.
Thank you. Time for this amendment has now elapsed. We will now move into time against this amendment. Are there any delegates wishing to speak against this amendment? Delegate of the United States of America, you have been recognized.
Delegate would like to bring to the attention of the House the definition of a terrorist attack. The calculated use of violence or threat of violence against citizens in order to attain goals that are political or religious or ideological in nature. This is done through intimidation or coercion or instilling fear. This delegate believes that Clause 14 helps to ensure that it describes what it shows that acts of terrorism needs to be, how they need to be stopped. And therefore thinks that this delegate believes that this clause should be kept in because it is just as relevant as any of the other clauses in this resolution.
Thank you. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
Any and all.
The delegate has opened himself to any and all points of information. Are there any in the House at this time? Delegates of Cuba and Afghanistan and Argentina, you have been recognized.
The delegate of Cuba believes that, Clause 14 is not entirely relevant. If you wanted to pinpoint within Clause 14 what would be relevant, the only thing you could find is subclause B, to prevent people from becoming terrorists or supporting terrorism. As for the rest of the clause, it has nothing to do with hostage taking, and even subclause B is barely relevant. So, if this was a resolution based on preventing terrorism and terrorism in general, this clause would be relevant, but not in a resolution based on terrorist hostage-taking.
Would the delegate please rephrase their point of information in the form of a question?
Does the delegate of the USA not agree that if we were discussing terrorist activities in general, that this would be relevant? But since we were discussing just terrorist hostage-taking, that it's relatively not relevant at all, other than Clause B?
No, this delegate does not agree this. For example, in Clause C, protect or strengthen our protection against terrorist attack. A terrorist attack, as this delegate said in the definition, is a threat of violence, and surely the being taken hostage or taking a individual hostage is threatening violence. So all of these subclauses and the clause as a whole are very relevant to the topic at hand.
Delegate of Afghanistan?
The delegate of Afghanistan would like to question if all these countries have already, as I know, most of these countries around the world has already pinpointed and done all these measures, or are so doing it right now. So, does the United States feel like reaffirming this idea would actually prevent hostage takings, while most of the world is already doing so?
This delegate believes that yes, it is important to reaffirm this idea because previous to this point in time, there has not been many. It's not been well publicised and well efficiently to stop terrorism. It's not been efficiently done so far, in this delegate's opinion. So I believe that reaffirming this delegate believes that reaffirming the efforts that countries are making at the moment would help prevent terrorist hostage taking.
Doesn't the delegate agree that stopping terrorist attacks through these outlined ways would solve all problems, including hostage-taking?
Could the chair please ask the delegate to rephrase her question?
That is in order. Would the delegate of Argentina please rephrase her question?
Doesn't the delegate agree that Clause 14 helps solve all the terrorist attacks, including hostage-taking?
Yes, the delegate does agree that it will stop other terrorist attacks, such as plane hijacking. So it's a very important. It's a key clause in the.
Thank you, delegate. Would the delegate please yield the floor back to the chair?
The delegate yields the floor back to the chair.
Thank you. Time on this amendment as a whole has now elapsed. We will now move into voting procedure on this amendment. Delegates may vote for or against using the check mark next to their placard sign. With the vote of 7 for and 6 against, this amendment passes. We will now move back into open debate on this resolution as a whole. Are there any delegates wishing to speak on this resolution? Delegate of France, you have been recognized.
Honorable chairs and fellow delegates, the delegate of France firmly believes that terrorism is a disease that threatens the existence of peace and the safety of our citizens. Now, this resolution may be comprehensive as well as multilateral. However, using this type of systematic approach to combat terrorism may be completely impractical. This is because terrorists operate on an irrational basis and will have no incentive to give in to our orderly demands. Instead, this delegate believes that the UN must establish certain guidelines outlining how nations should react to terrorist kidnappings. Although there are proactive and systematic measures that could be used to counter terrorism, terrorist hostage-taking is a more specific issue that must be dealt with in a completely different way. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
This delegate is open to one point of information.
The delegate has opened himself to one point of information. Delegates, please refrain from raising your placards until the chair has finished asking for them. Are there any such points in the House at this time? Delegate of Kuwait, you have been recognized.
Does the delegate of France not realize that its own special forces, the GIGN, have taken systematic steps in combating hostage taking, and the delegate is contradicting himself?
This delegate does not believe so, because the purpose of today is to create a resolution that combats terrorist hostage taking, and France has a perspective that terrorist hostage taking should not be a systematic approach, but rather a way to deal with the irrational basis of terrorists.
Thank you, Delegate. Would the delegate please yield the floor back to the chair?
I yield the floor back to the chair.
Thank you. We are now in open debate on this resolution. Are there any delegates wishing to speak on this resolution as a whole? Delegate of Kuwait, you have been recognized.
Respected Chair and fellow delegates, terrorist attacks, especially when it is a matter of hostages being taken, innocent hostages being taken, wherever they occur, are terrible deeds and are condemned by every nation. We, as the United Nations, must ensure that we implement policies and solutions to stop and counter such attacks before they even happen. This resolution talks about not only measures to prevent hostage taking, but also what to do when such a dreaded attack actually takes place. The delegate of Kuwait strongly urges the House to vote for this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
Any and all.
The delegate has opened himself to any and all points of information. Are there any in the House at this time? Delegate of Pakistan, you have been recognized.
Would the delegate of Kuwait agree that when making preventative measures for this issue, it is impossible to focus solely on terrorist hostage taking, and in the preventative measures that are outlined herein, it is necessary to take a more holistic approach and talk about preventing terrorism as a whole? So would Kuwait agree with that?
Yes, the delegate of Kuwait strongly, wholeheartedly agrees with that.
Thank you. Would the delegate please yield the floor back to the chair?
Yes, the delegate would yield the floor back to the chair.
We are once again in open debate on this resolution as a whole. Are there any delegates wishing to speak on this resolution? Delegate of Pakistan, you have been recognized.
Honorable chairs and esteemed delegates, When deciding how to vote on this resolution, the Delegate of Pakistan would like to urge all delegates to be constructive rather than destructive. After all, the whole spirit of the United Nations is nations putting aside their differences to reach a larger goal. And although granted this resolution does have many flaws, including that it is focused on too large of an issue and fails to have specific effects on terrorist hostage-taking exclusively, the Delegate of Pakistan believes that overall this resolution has more benefits than detriments. And in voting for a resolution, that is what we must take into account, whether implementing these measures will benefit the world more or be harmful. And the Delegate of Pakistan does not believe that in any way any of these clauses can be destructive or harmful or in violation of any nation's policy. So therefore, the Delegate of Pakistan urges all nations to vote for this resolution in spite of some of its flaws, because it will do more good than bad, more good than harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Is the Delegate open to any points of information?
Any and all.
The Delegate has opened himself to any and all points of information. Are there any in the House at this time? Delegates of Argentina and Singapore, you have been recognized.
How does clauses 2B and 2G actually are specific and help terrorist taking, hostage taking?
2G does directly relate to the topic, as it is talking about the correct responses to the issue of terrorist hostage taking. Granted, clause 2B is not related to this resolution, but as I said in my speech, we must think of being constructive, and the delegate does not believe that this one subclause detracts from the merits of the resolution as a whole.
Does the delegate of Pakistan not believe that as there are just few flaws in this resolution, there should be amendments made to change them to make it an overall really good resolution instead of just a good one?
The delegate wholeheartedly agrees.
Thank you. Would the delegate please yield the floor back to the chair?
So yielded.
We are once again in open debate on this resolution. Are there any delegates wishing to speak on this resolution as a whole? Delegate of Cuba, you have been recognized.
This delegate has submitted an amendment. Will that be recognized?
That is in order. The amendment reads to strike Clause 15. The chair sets a closed debate time of 3 minutes for and 3 minutes against this amendment. Delegate, you now have the floor.
Honorable Chair, fellow delegates, Clause 15 encourages member states to eliminate the practice of paying ransoms to providing concessions, or essentially wants to eradicate the general intent of taking hostages. However, this will not eliminate the practice of giving ransoms. The families and the friends of the hostages will still be able to provide ransoms. And in this delegate's honest opinion, it only puts more people in harm's way by putting the incentive of paying the ransoms into the hands of the family and the friends of the hostage, which could lead to more hostages. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
The delegate is open to any points of information pertaining to this speech.
The delegate has opened himself to any and all points of information pertaining to his speech. Are there any points in the House at this time? Delegates of the United States of America and Argentina, you have been recognized.
The delegate of the country that spoke just before this delegate believes that striking Clause 15 could possibly help the resolution as a whole?
Yes, the delegate does believe that striking Clause 15 will help the resolution as a whole because it makes it more relevant and more safe for the families of hostage victims.
Doesn't the delegate believe that eliminating ransoms will stop the terrorists from taking hostages because they will not get what they want?
No, as this delegate has stated before, they will still be able to get ransoms from the families and even the friends of the hostages, so the ransoms will not be eliminated.
Thank you, Delegate. Would the delegate please yield the floor back to the chair?
The delegate yields the floor back to the chair.
Thank you. We are still in time for this amendment. Are there any delegates wishing to speak for this amendment? Delegate of Kuwait, you have been recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Chair and fellow delegates, we must eliminate the practice. We must not eliminate the practice of paying ransoms. When someone who takes an hostage asked to pay ransom, it is because that shows that they're willing to negotiate and not simply kill the hostage. If we play along, we may even recover the hostage and even not pay ransom. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
None.
The delegate has not opened himself to any points of information. Would the delegate please yield the floor back to the chair?
Yes, the delegate yields the floor back to the chair.
Thank you. Time for this amendment has now elapsed. We will now move into time against this amendment. Are there any delegates wishing to speak against this amendment? Delegate of the United States of America, you have been recognized.
This delegate urges all other delegates to not allow this amendment to pass because paying ransoms to terrorist hostage takers just gives them more incentive to take more hostages. I think the delegate believes the sum of money paid by Western governments last year was somewhere in the region of $30 million US. How can any delegate believe that paying ransoms could possibly prevent hostage taking in the future? The delegate of Pakistan, of Kuwait previously said submitted clause 20. However, he has gone back on what he has said effectively by asking to strike clause 12. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
Any and all.
The delegate has opened himself to any and all points of information. Are there any in the House at this time? Delegates of South Africa, Afghanistan, Cuba, Argentina, and Kuwait, you have been recognized.
Does the delegate of USA not believe that if we stop giving the terrorists ransoms, they will eventually stop taking hostages?
He believes that not paying ransoms will stop hostage taking in the future.
Delegate of Afghanistan.
Does the delegate of the United States believe that, depending on the situation, that it might be required for another nation or another group to pay the ransom?
The chair asked the delegate to repeat his question. This delegate couldn't quite hear what he said.
That is in order. Would the delegate of Afghanistan please repeat his point of information?
Does the delegate from the United States believe that, depending on the situation, that it might be necessary to pay the ransom? For example, if I had the President of the United States or any nation, for example, that I might have to pay ransom to get him back, or release hostages, or any of our prisoners.
No, this delegate does not believe that paying ransom could be suitable in certain situations. In all situations, it should not even be considered, because it's just going to worsen the problems, because people are going to... It shows the terrorists that countries are willing to pay for people to be returned. And it's just a massive incentive for any terrorist, hostage taker, to abduct more people. Thank you.
Does the delegate of USA not agree that the ransom would not be eliminated by this clause, because families and friends can still pay ransoms? And B, do you not agree that not all hostage situations are the incentive of being ransomed? Some are done for political reasons as opposed to financial.
Yes, he said it agrees that sometimes it's done for other terrorist hostage taking is done for other reasons. And in this case, rapid response team is very suitable for dealing with a situation that could occur. However, ransoms are usually the main incentive for terrorist hostage taking. The government in the United States of America believes that only supplies administrative assistance to families of terrorist hostage takers. Of hostages, and continually urges families of hostages to not pay the ransoms.
Delegate of Argentina. Delegate of Argentina. Seeing as the delegate doesn't appear to be present. Delegate of Kuwait.
The delegate of USA mentioned in his speech that the delegate of Kuwait went back on his word. In fact, the delegate has not gone back on his word, simply that this delegate feels that by striking out Clause 15, we show that money is not more important than human lives. And does the delegate feel the same?
Yes, this delegate definitely believes that money is not as important as human lives. However, this resolution is just another step in the global effort to prevent terrorist hostage taking in the future.
Thank you, Delegate. Would the delegate please yield the floor back to the chair?
The delegate yields the floor back to the chair.
Thank you. Time on this amendment as a whole has now elapsed. We will now move directly into voting procedures. Delegates may vote for or against this amendment. Delegate of the UK, please cast your vote. With a vote of 6 for and 5 against, this amendment passes. We will now have an announcement from the DSG, Arthur.
Hello, delegates. Can all delegates hear me? If you can, please give me a smiley face. All right. On Friday, June 15, 1600 UTC, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, David Cameron, was in occupied office at Her Majesty's government since May 11, 2012, was taken hostage by what is suspected to be a coalition force of Al-Qaeda and Taliban terrorists. 3 members of the Diplomatic Protection Group were killed in the bedlam of the abduction, upon which their lacerations are at present being examined for prospective indications of the identification of the terrorist factions responsible for the calamity. In addition, information from survivors and witnesses regarding the physical attributes of suspected individuals is being collected and investigated. Delegates, it is now your task to save David Cameron's life.
The floor is once again open on this resolution. Are there any delegates wishing to speak on this resolution as a whole? Delegate of the UK, you have been recognized.
Thank you, Chair. The shocking news that we've all just faced is that one of the world's most powerful leaders has been kidnapped, and we can't afford to delay any further. I vote that we insert, this resolution doesn't do enough, in my opinion. It's too wishy-washy, it doesn't quite address the issue, and now a leader's life is on the line. I urge you to submit amendments to this resolution which forces action from nations to help save the Prime Minister's life. Please, the people of the UK are begging you to help.
Thank you, Delegate. The Chair would like to remind the House to please refrain from using personal pronouns such as I and you. Is the Delegate open to any points of information?
No, thank you, Chair.
Seeing as the Delegate has not opened himself to any points of information, would the Delegate please yield the floor back to the Chair?
The Delegate yields the floor.
The floor is once again open. Are there any delegates wishing to speak on this resolution as a whole? Delegate of Singapore, you have been recognized.
Delegate, the delegate has submitted an amendment.
That is in order. The amendment reads, to strike Clause 13. The Chair sets a closed debate time of 3 minutes for and 3 minutes against this amendment. Delegate, you now have the floor.
Thank you. The clause number 13 states that trust the International Committee will remain steadfast in their resolve to combat terrorism, especially in relation to hostage taking, and will do so guided by the mandates of the Counter-Terrorism Community, HRC, Human Rights Commission, and the Charter of the United Nations. This delegate believes that this clause does not actually do anything as its own and should be striked out, as it states trust underlined, and meaning that it's a sign of hope that the international community will remain steadfast, and also, yeah.
Thank you, Delegate. Is the Delegate open to any points of information?
Thank you.
Seeing as the Delegate has not opened herself to any points of information, would the Delegate please yield the floor back to the Chair?
Yield the floor back to the Chair.
Thank you. Time for this amendment has now elapsed. We will now move into time against this amendment. Are there any delegates wishing to speak against this amendment? Delegate Kuwait, you have been recognized.
Point of information to the Chair.
Please state your point.
Motion to move to previous question.
That is in order. Are there any objections to this motion? Seeing as there are none, we will now move into voting procedure on this amendment. Delegates may vote for or against. With a vote of 3 for and 7 against, this amendment fails. The floor is once again open. The Chair would like to remind the House to please keep in mind the emergency development when speaking on the resolution, as there is a leader's life on the line. Are there any delegates wishing to speak on this resolution as a whole? Delegate of the United Kingdom, you have been recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Can this delegate please remind the members of the House sitting here today that a leader's life is on the line, and this delegate really wants to urge the other delegates in the House that we have to do all we can now to save the Prime Minister. So if the delegates in the House could please submit amendments to add force to this resolution so that we can collaboratively save one of the most important people in the West. Thank you.
Is the delegate open to any points of information?
This delegate is open to any and all points pertaining to his speech.
The delegate has opened himself to any and all points of information pertaining to his speech. Are there any such points in the House? Seeing as there are none, would the delegate please yield the floor back to the Chair?
So yielded.
The floor is once again open. Are there any delegates wishing to speak on this resolution as a whole? Delegate of Pakistan, you have been recognized.
Honorable Chairs, distinguished delegates, to add to what the previous delegate just stated, now is the time to strengthen our resolution to the maximum. This delegate is sad that the past 3 amendments have all been to strike a clause. We should now focus either on amending clauses or adding more clauses to this resolution to strengthen it further instead of making it weaker by striking clauses. Although some of the clauses may not be perfect, each one of these clauses adds something to this resolution, and so we should be focused more on adding to this resolution instead of subtracting from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
Any and all.
The delegate has opened himself to any and all points of information. Are there any in the House at this time? Seeing as there are none, would the delegate please yield the floor back to the Chair?
So yielded.
The floor is once again open. Are there any delegates wishing to speak on this resolution as a whole? Delegate of Argentina, you have been recognized.
Honorable Chair, fellow delegates, Argentina is an active country concerning hostage-taking. This has been going on through the years, since 1992, 1994, and 2001, and up till now. Also, in other countries where there is war like Syria today, hostage-taking is very common. Although hostage-taking has been constantly fought against, it is still the criminals' way to get their way done. It usually takes place in the high-risk places like banks and airlines. Argentina launched a course for employees working in those areas. Also, 85% of cases are solved peacefully, but the rest might cause serious problems if not solved. Therefore, as United Nations, we should cooperate and put an end to this crime through the effective cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
Any and all.
The delegate has opened herself to any and all points of information. Are there any in the House at this time? Seeing as there are none, would the delegate please yield the floor back to the Chair?
The delegate yields the floor back to the Chair.
Thank you. We will now have our DSG presenting us with a further development on the breaking news.
Delegates, there has been further development regarding the kidnapping of Prime Minister David Cameron. The MI5 suspects that there is a bomb potentially planted in Samefield and 10 Downing Street. Hundreds of citizens have been evacuated and further investigation has been launched. Currently, the locations and the conditions of the Prime Minister remain unknown. Delegates, the DSG cannot stress how important it is to save the life of a leader of such a powerful country, especially the UK. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. The floor is once again open. Are there any delegates wishing to speak on this resolution as a whole, keeping in mind the recent developments? Delegate of the United Kingdom, you have been recognized.
The delegate has submitted an amendment.
That is in order. That sounds corrected. The amendment has not been received by the chair, so that will not be in order, delegate. The floor is once again open. Are there any delegates wishing to speak on this resolution as a whole? Delegate of the United States of America, you have been recognized.
Submitted an amendment.
That is in order. The amendment reads to amend Clause 19 to read, urges nations to have the immediate establishment of an internationally recognized QRF in order to prevent further abductions of individuals. The chair sets a closed debate time of 3 minutes for and 3 minutes against this amendment. Delegate, you now have the floor.
With the breaking news that the House has just heard, this delegate believes that the immediate establishment of a quick reaction force is necessary. On top of this, it needs to be internationally recognised. This will show the terrorist hostage takers that we do not accept terrorist hostage taking, and find that it is unacceptable for anyone to be abducted.
Thank you. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
Any and all.
The delegate has opened himself to any and all points of information. Are there any in the House at this time? Delegates of the United Kingdom and Kuwait, you have been recognized.
Does the delegate of the United States not feel that this is too little too late, considering the emergency that is on our hands right now, and that we have to give nations the power this very second to be able to decide what to do? By the time that any nation has set up, or any governing body has set up a quick response force, it might be too late for millions of civilians in London and for the Prime Minister himself.
Thank you for your point, Delegate of the United Kingdom. I do understand this. Thank you.
Does the delegate not feel that the response team he's talking about is the same as the rapid response team mentioned in this resolution?
So it definitely does not feel that, because the response team talked about in Clause 19 is more of one that is set up by one single nation. This will be an internationally recognized organization which will fight hostage takers.
Thank you, Delegate. Would the delegate please yield the floor back to the chair?
The delegate yields the floor back to the chair.
Thank you. Time for this amendment has now elapsed. We will now move into time against this amendment. Are there any delegates wishing to speak against this amendment? Seeing as there are none, We will now move directly into voting procedure on this amendment. Delegates may vote for and against. With the vote of 7 for and 6 against, this amendment passes. We will now move back into open debate on this resolution as a whole. Are there any delegates wishing to speak on this resolution? Delegate of the United Kingdom, you have been recognized.
The delegate has submitted an amendment to the resolution.
That is in order. The amendment reads, to add a new clause, decides to give nations the power to pay ransoms and to use force as deemed necessary by nations concerned in order to save political hostages thought to be too important to be allowed to die or be executed. Once again, a decision taken by the nations concerned. The chair sets a closed debate time of 3 minutes for and 3 minutes against this amendment. Delegate, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. While this delegate will admit that this is a very serious amendment to put forward, and that this will clearly have ramifications in the rest of the resolution, this delegate definitely feels that we can't sit around and wait and dilly-dally about this resolution without actually taking any firm action. When hostages are too important to be allowed to die or be executed or be taken away from their positions in a nation, the country must be able to make its own decision without having to work through the channels to get permission from the international body. We can't afford to wait around and sit around and wait for faxes to come through and just have to sit there and do nothing. Our Prime Minister is in danger. Our country is in danger. And this resolution will give not just the UK, but any other country which might have the unfortunate circumstance of finding itself in the same position to be able to act and to resolve these issues immediately. I urge you to vote for this amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
This delegate is open to any and all points of information.
The delegate has opened himself to any and all points of information. Are there any in the House at this time? Delegates of France, the USA, and Pakistan, you have been recognized.
This delegate understands the delegate of UK's emotional response to this issue. However, this delegate would like to question whether the delegate of UK said that certain people considered important should have the ability to pay ransoms. But how would we determine or define who would be important and who would not be important? Where would you set this threshold exactly?
As the amendment reads, it's impossible to set a threshold on this, and for what one nation might believe to be not important, the other nation would believe to be very important. But I feel that this is a decision. Apologies for use of personal pronouns. This delegate feels that this decision has to be utterly in the hands of the nation concerned. If another country doesn't like David Cameron, they could easily refuse to vote for us to save him. It's impossible for delegates to decide on what is important and what's not, and this is why the decision must be in the hands of the nations concerned. 1 second, the delegate has to go answer the door. Oh dear. Simulation fail.
Meanwhile, delegates, please continue to ask your points.
Apologies, this delegate is back.
Does the delegate of the United Kingdom believe that these powers should only be given, should be made emergency powers, and that to pay ransoms is not acceptable, and force is the only acceptable way of dealing with these terrorists?
This delegate understands that these powers should probably be emergency powers, and if we as a nation had more time, we probably would have written the word emergency powers to pay ransoms and to use force, for which this delegate apologizes. But I feel that ransoms are a viable way to sort this out, because David Cameron cannot afford to die. We would fall apart as a nation if we lost to the terrorists. And so, even though we might pay a ransom, and even though they might get their gratification from their crime, we have to ensure that our Prime Minister survives at all costs.
Follow up?
Denied due to time constraints. The Chair would just like to remind the House to please refrain from using personal pronouns such as I. Delegate of Pakistan. Delegate of Pakistan.
Sorry. Does the delegate of the UK not feel that this amendment is quite hypocritical, considering that the UK has a strict policy of not negotiating with terrorists under any circumstances?
This delegate understands the delegate of Pakistan's point that this nation does not negotiate with terrorists in any circumstances. But this isn't a run-of-the-mill. If any kidnapping should be run-of-the-mill, this is a normal kidnapping. This is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. This is the Prime Minister of the G8 nation. This is the Prime Minister of one of the most important nations in the world, second only, some might say, to the US. And I don't feel that we can afford to look back at our rules and look at our morals and say, oh, well, we said that we won't do it, so we will never do it. But this is a unique situation, and this requires unique action.
Thank you, Delegate. Would the Delegate please yield the floor back to the Chair?
So yielded.
Time for this amendment has now elapsed. We will now move into time against this amendment. Are there any delegates wishing to speak against this amendment? Delegate of South Africa, you have been recognized.
This delegate believes that this amendment is not entirely suitable for this resolution because it only says that it is in order to save political hostages thought to be too important to be allowed to die or be executed. Whereas this delegate believes that the nation should have the power to pay ransoms and to use force not only for political hostages but also to others, because it is a basic human right and there should be no discrimination no matter what position you hold in the country.
Thank you, Delegate. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
Any and all.
The delegate has opened herself to any and all points of information. Are there any in the House at this time? Delegates of the UK, USA, and Argentina, you have been recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Would the delegate of South Africa not accept that this is a unique situation requiring different action from the norm, and that while the delegate of the UK will admit that it is a basic human right to be treated equally, that the Prime Minister is far too important for us to consider changing the resolution at a time where minute by minute situations change?
The delegate does agree, but this delegate believes that the nation should not have the power to pay ransoms only for political hostages, even though this delegate understands the emotional state that the delegate of UK is going through, but this delegate believes that it should not be in order to only save political hostages.
Thank you, Delegate. Would the Delegate please yield the floor back to the Chair?
Point of information to the Chair.
Please state your point.
The Delegate believes that there were more points of information than just United Kingdom.
The Chair stands corrected. Delegate of the United States of America, please proceed.
Before I ask my point of information, I must urge all nations to pass this amendment. How does the Delegate of South Africa feel that in such a unique situation, such a important amendment could not be added to this this resolution? And also, how do you believe it could be changed in order to satisfy the beliefs of the Delegate of South Africa?
This Delegate will get back to you on chat.
Doesn't this amendment deal with hostages in an even more specific and detailed way? Don't all the other clauses in the resolution deal with the other hostages?
This Delegate agrees, but this Delegate does not understand why there has to be a separate clause that has to be added only specifically for political hostages that are too important to be allowed to die or be executed. Instead, why not just, like the rest of the resolution, aim it to the general public as well? Because including the political hostages, like the president, the general public also has the right, to be saved, and therefore the power should be given to the nations to save them as well.
Thank you, Delegate. Would the Delegate please yield the floor back to the Chair?
The Delegate yields the floor back to the Chair.
Thank you. Time on this amendment as a whole has now elapsed. We will now move directly into voting procedure. Delegates may vote for or against. With a vote of 6 for and 4 against, this amendment passes. Time on this resolution as a whole has now elapsed. We will now move into voting procedures on this resolution as a whole. Delegates may vote for, against, and abstain. With a vote of 9 for and 1 abstention, this resolution passes. Clapping is in order. Following the developments we have had today, we will be hosting an Emergency Security Council meeting tomorrow, June 17th, at 1300 UTC. We will have the original Security Council nations present, as well as diplomats, ambassadors, and delegates who can drop in and provide input into this serious situation. Further developments regarding the terrorist motives will be collected overnight and released an hour prior to the debate tomorrow. Thank you for participating in O-MUN's June Global Debate. On behalf of the O-MUN staff, thank you for participating in today's debate. And now I would like to hand the floor over to O-MUN's director, Ms. Lisa Martin.